Welcome to WITS, What It Takes to Succeed show. I'm your host, Igor Zdorgak. By trade, I'm a technical business transformation project program portfolio manager with expertise in PMI, Scrum, Agile, and Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, ITIL, and other methodologies, techniques, and practices. For many years, I've been writing about what it takes to succeed, interviewing leaders and experts in their field, and I'm bringing it to the masses, as Tim Ferriss would say, on a new platform. The new Fast Forward MBA in Project Management is written by Eric Verzuh, and it's an international bestseller. Eric is the president of the Versatile company, which provides project management training and consulting to thousands of professionals each year. His clients include major government agencies, small and large companies, and non-profit organizations such as diverse industries as aerospace, healthcare, information technology, and education. And let me tell you, I have a master's in management, and after reading Eric's book, I can tell you that there are certain things that I wish would have been taught to me before. I have read Eric's current, the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management book, as well as his previous version. And this book was full of wonderful material from project management to portfolio management, from requirements gathering to quality management, change management to agile, and product management, and so much more. I don't want to give away too much. You have to buy Eric's book to learn more about this and other topics in detail. And if we can get started, let's begin with the questions. Eric, why did you write?
So first of all, Igor, thanks for inviting me to speak, and thanks for your enthusiasm for my book. So the first edition of the book I wrote in 1998, and I started thinking about writing a book in 1995. And in 1995, this is long before Amazon made buying a book easy. I walked into the biggest bookstore in Seattle. I found 5 books on project management. Now, they were either way too big or way too small, or they just weren't readable. It was kind of a Goldilocks story, right? None of them was just right. So that's when I first decided I think I'd rather write my own book. And, of course, because I'm in training, I wanted a book that I could hand out in class, or at least recommend to everybody and say, look, for everything you've learned in class, this is the book you want. So my first edition was the perfect book for my clients. Now, this edition, the 6th edition that just came out, I wrote because I could see some shifts in the PM space that I wanted to address. And the number one issue is that there are more and more people who are responsible for managing projects, and yet they are not necessarily professional project managers. And so you see more and more people who are in this role of project manager. And what I saw is that so many of them miss the most important part of project management, which is to be the leader that brings all the stakeholders together. So we added new chapters to stress that point and reinforce that point in all the other chapters. Project management tools are leadership tools because leaders help others make good decisions about all kinds of things related to successful projects and successful organizations.
You begin your book with a chapter by declaring that a project management is a platform for innovation. How is project management a platform for innovation?
So innovation, and defined in the book as a fresh approach to solving a problem that people actually care about. Okay, innovation is always about understanding stakeholders and understanding what is important to them and bringing people together to accomplish something that hasn't.
Now, it has been said that leaders are born and not taught. So how does mastering the art of project management provide the foundation for the art of leadership?
Right. Leaders are born and not taught, and yet I would tell you that the science of project management, the nuts and bolts, all the processes that you can learn, and again, if you're a PMI fan, Project Management Institute, you know they've got their body of knowledge, right?
Yep.
But if you know all of those things, really that's the science of project management, and that, I would say, is the foundation for the art of leadership. Because once I can, I know how to calculate a schedule, I know how to identify risks, I have all the checklists in place, then I have critical thinking tools and communication tools. And I think that's kind of I think that helps the new person to project management maybe make it feel less gigantic and less intimidating, is to think of project management as critical thinking and communication tools. Well, now, if you're a leader, you need those kind of tools. So who needs leadership on projects is, I think, the second half of that question, is who needs leadership? Well, on a project, we have a very diverse amount of stakeholders. And contrast that to the traditional view of leadership, right? The traditional view of leadership is kind of a pyramid, and it's that person at the top of the org chart that leads all the other people. But projects are different. And I would draw the project leadership challenge to look like a wagon wheel, right? You put the project manager in the middle and all the stakeholders around that person, around the project. Most of those stakeholders don't actually report to the project manager. Instead, they look to the project manager to clarify the issues or to facilitate decision making, to raise up the problems, and really to ensure the right processes are being followed. So then, again, that's the art of leadership, is putting all the critical thinking tools and communication tools to work in the right way. I'd say that anybody who has some experience, some work experience, can start to learn most of the tools, the science of project management. It's not that difficult, but the art of it is putting it to work. And it's much like woodworking, right? I can learn how to use a saw, I can learn how to glue wood together, I can learn how to, use nails and screws, but really it can take me years to get the art of craftsmanship.
That's so true. Like a great explanation, Eric. Now there are projects and there are operational projects. What's the difference?
So operations and projects. Operations are the things that we do over and over. So, for example, I just took a flight from Salt Lake City, Utah to Seattle, Washington the other day. Now, that airline operates that flight over and over, right? So they know how to do it. There's not a lot of discovery involved. It doesn't necessarily make it simple to do, right? To run an airline is not simple, but because they're doing it over and over, the challenge of managing an operation is to perfect every step of that process so that it becomes reliable and efficient, that airline is as predictable and cost-effective as possible, right? Because they're doing the same thing over and over. Projects are changes. Projects are doing something unique and different. And so every time a project has some type of discovery involved. So recently we saw that the new Perseverance rover on Mars was landed. Now talk about all kinds of new discoveries required in order to accomplish that. Now of course that's an extreme example. But whether you're remodeling your kitchen, or you're building a freeway, or maybe you're deploying a medical record software package, there is a certain amount of discovery involved. And the challenge of managing projects is to do that kitchen remodel right the first time. Make it as perfect and cost-effective, as trouble-free as possible the first time. So good project managers use consistent practices and learn from previous projects. Projects will never be as repeatable as an operation, but consistent project management is critical to taming the discoveries and the unknowables that are part of every project. And that's the difference between managing operations and managing projects. Projects always have a certain amount of unknown.
Right, and that's why lessons learned are important from one project to another project to another.
Absolutely.
Now, you say that project management is industry independent and project managers are not. How come?
Because there are technical decisions on every project. So project managers with technical expertise can be involved in technical decisions. Likewise, if a project manager doesn't have technical expertise, they cannot effectively participate in technical decisions. When I had my house built, I required the technical expertise.
Right. Now, getting to your point of creativity, can you describe why a development process is not project management?
Sure. A development process is really the steps for building something, whereas project management is the steps for clarifying goals, communicating, coordinating. So, for example, the right way to build a freeway is very different than the right way to discover a vaccine. And that's different than the right way to build a video game. Each of those requires different expertise, different techniques, and a different process. So think of that as a development process. It's critical not to get confused about this, and there really is a lot of confusion about this, because a development process is how you perform the work. Project management is how you manage the work. And so one of the areas where you see the most amount of confusion right now is on software projects. Software projects are getting confused about this because you hear debates about whether a project should use project management or agile. Well, that's the wrong conversation. It's really a distinction about using waterfall development techniques or agile development techniques, because those are two different methods for building software. So no matter which one you use, you have to have methods for communication, putting the right people in the right project, for managing risks or managing scope and schedule. Scrum is a popular method for managing an agile development process. So add Scrum tools to your project management toolbox. But notice that if you're involved with Scrum at all, you realize that Scrum does not include a single code development technique. It doesn't tell you how to design a system for iterative delivery, because those are part of the development method. So the key here is that a project should choose the best development approach given what is being built. Then the management tools should match that development approach.
Yep, I totally agree. Now, how does logical framework tie into the project management? And I'll give a plug to my good friend Terry Schmidt. Actually, his book, Strategic Project Management, made simple solutions for tools for leaders and teams. This new release is coming in May, so again, everyone will also benefit from his book also, but how does the logical framework tie into the project management?
Right. Terry Schmidt has a great book on this. He's my favorite. He's absolutely my favorite authority on the logical framework. And two editions ago, so it's for the last 3 editions, Terry's had a very nice, concise description of the logical framework approach that's been in our chapter on project initiation. So think of this, the logical framework creates a holistic view of a project's strategic value and the details for executing the project so that it meets the strategic goals. Every project should deliver value. That's the basic definition of a successful project. Most projects describe their value in a business case. Then they develop a charter and detailed project action plan so they can execute. But the logical framework, or the log frame for short, is a matrix that puts all of these together so that a project sponsor, a project manager, and project team member can all see the big picture and all the details in one place. I'd call the log frame a project management tool just as surely as a Gantt chart is a project management tool. Now, what's interesting to me is this technique was first developed probably about 50 years ago, and it was developed for projects that were funded by the United States government or other charitable organizations that wanted to fund development projects in development countries. They might be education projects, they might be infrastructure projects, they might be projects to clean up the environment in these development countries. And the log frame created a very explicit connection between a strategic goal, for example, lower infant mortality, and a specific project, such as using smartphones for prenatal counseling. And so what was very important is that the log frame contains very specific metrics of success at the project level that will lead to very specific success metrics at the strategic level. And so what this does is it creates a very rigorous business case for the project. Again, imagine you have a matrix that shows all really the key strategic goal for the project, the key goal for the project that's going to support the strategic goal, right, and then all the details about how that project will be executed. It's all on one diagram. So it makes it a very effective tool for a business case. I would absolutely advocate that every business case contains a log frame diagram. And what's also interesting to me is, as proven as this technique has been in developing nations and what we call development projects, it's still very unknown in the corporate world. But it's absolutely important.
No, it's true. Like, well, I'm a painter, artist, and they said like a painting worth 1,000 words. You know, I can put like a 10,000, word documents and charters, but nicely framed log framework diagram, just boom, gives you everything what you need.
Right, all in one place. And again, it's an amazing tool to help executives to really see the big picture, for project managers to keep their eye on the big picture, and for team members to understand how all the details that they're working on contribute to the strategic goal.
Correct. Now, I like how you define the stakeholders. Why put stakeholders into a different category, those who are engaged and those who are affected?
Right. So I like to say that successful projects satisfy stakeholders. Now, some of the stakeholders are actively engaged in getting the project done. I mean, the project team themselves are stakeholders. Then you have executives who are making decisions, maybe resource managers that are contributing resources to the project. You have customers who clearly understand their requirements and are engaged with the project team in designing the solution. Those are classic stakeholders, right, who all are engaged in the project. And yet, perhaps the stakeholder that could most derail the project are the ones who are affected by the project. And those ones who are affected are most likely to be ignored. So, for example, my hospital, my healthcare provider, is recently introduced a new medical records management system. And if you think about that, there's all kinds of stakeholders in medical records management. The ones who are most likely to be ignored in the whole deployment are those who are not necessary to deploy it, but who will be affected by the project. All the frontline people who are working in the hospital system or even the patients themselves. And so I would always advocate, when you're looking for stakeholders, ask whose job will be changed by this project. That's just one simple way to ask who is an affected stakeholder. And then once you start to realize that you have affected stakeholders, that's when the discipline of change management kicks in. And that's why in this new edition, the 6th edition of my book, there's a whole chapter on change management. It's the discipline that helps people who are affected by a project to accept the change and to effectively learn to work within the new system. So this chapter is written by Tim Creasy of ProSci. Tim is one of the leaders of change management, and ProSci is really a pioneer in the whole change management discipline. And their methodology has been adopted around the world. So what I would suggest for every project manager is when you're thinking about stakeholders, think about those ones that you're going to be putting on your list to communicate with and to coordinate with to get the job done. Those are the engaged stakeholders. But also think about the people whose jobs will be disrupted, because if they really don't get on board, that beautiful new system, whether it's medical records or CRM or whatever, is probably going to stumble. And again, that's why you need to have the discipline of change management on every project. I think that change management is growing. There's a growing awareness of it in the project management space, but any good project manager should totally be aware of that and maybe start thinking about specializing in it, or at least have somebody who has a specialty in change management on their team. And that's why we have a new chapter on it in this book.
Yep,
this new edition.
Great. I'd like to talk about the healthcare system and integration with the stakeholders. On my recent implementation for the New York State, I basically had to implement integration between thousands of hospitals, tens and thousands of ambulatory and other clinics, and each of them, like, it probably would be like 30 or 40 different health integration systems. So not only do you have to integrate between the various health systems, then you have so many federal, state, and individual hospital stakeholders to say, okay, what is the patient? You know, what's their identification? How do you define it? How's your system implemented? So that's again, if you miss one system or one healthcare, then you go and say, okay, well, it doesn't integrate with our system, so, you know, Igor, what did you do? So you have to make sure that all those stakeholders are included.
Absolutely.
Now, how does, when you say like, we talked about the requirements, how does one write acceptance criteria?
Right. You know, acceptance criteria is important because the project team eventually wants to quit, right? I don't mean they want to quit, but I mean eventually they want to be done.
Right.
And they want to know what the finish line looks like so that they can hand off the project. And it's the same thing that the customer wants. They want to know, what am I going to have? So acceptance criteria is really the way that the customer says, if you do this and you can demonstrate that, then you're done. And that's good for both sides, right? So there's really two major concepts in the book that address this. One is, when you write a business case, it should include business requirements. And of course, the business requirements are defined more in the requirements chapter. But what's really important here is business requirements say, what will we be able to do as a result of the project? Okay. So in my business, quite often, we get involved with project management software deployments. And the acceptance criteria is that as a result of the project, people like executives will have a clear understanding of all the schedules of all the projects that are being actively worked on. So that's a business requirement. And so we could say to them, do you executives see what you needed to see? And they say, yes. Well, that's part of our acceptance criteria, right? So the business requirement is part of writing an acceptance criteria. I'd also say that acceptance criteria is influenced by another new chapter in this 6th edition, which is on project quality. And the whole quality discipline is about how to measure whether things are being done correctly, right? Whether they're being done to requirements or to industry standards. So as a project manager, you can look either at the discipline of how do I write business requirements, or you can look to the quality discipline about how do you define when something is correctly performed. And in both places, you'll see
That's
how I can write what it means to cross the finish line, to deliver correctly.
That's correct. Yep. And you also have like an agile chapter saying, okay, as a user of a banking system, I want to go into my bank so that I can withdraw or add more money. So you have a specific example in that one. So I like that.
Right. Yeah. In Agile, the user stories are effectively a acceptance criteria, right? And so we think about requirements, user stories. Those are ways that the analyst or the customer test the system and say, yes, it allows me to do what I originally set out to do, so they become acceptance criteria. And again, the big goal there is this project, we don't want this project to go on and on and on. We want it to end, and we want everybody to be happy that it ended. So this is the definition of what it looks like when it's done.
Correct. Now, why do you say like that all project management is risk management?
Well, it goes back to my original premise that every project contains discovery, that we're going to learn as we go. You know, every project, again, whether it's a kitchen remodel or putting that rover on Mars, there's a certain amount of discovery as we go. And so what we don't know about our project can cause us to be late or over budget. So every technique in the project manager's toolbox helps us to clarify expectations about scope, schedule, cost, quality, and to manage the project to meet those expectations. All of our tools address the risk of being late or over budget or producing a subpar product. And so if we rigorously use all of the tools, we will reduce all the risks associated with the discovery that happens on every project.
Well, correct. You mentioned that identifying and managing risk is not appreciated by people who have not been educated in project management. So how does one show the benefits of performing risk management?
Right. That's very interesting. It's very challenging because when someone is diligent about risk management, they have fewer problems. Let's take an example. I've got several brothers, and one of them, when he plans for a cross-country car trip, he always gets an oil change that includes a vehicle, check over. So they have a 10-point checklist or something. And as a result, every time before he leaves town, his car's in good working order. Now I don't do that. And so on any one trip, that might not matter. But over time, he's going to have a lot fewer car problems on his trips when he travels. So when it comes to diligent risk management, it's hard to measure the cost savings of problems that don't occur. But over time, an organization with risk management practices will more consistently meet their cost, schedule, scope, and other goals. And so I think there's a certain amount of leap of faith that goes with risk management. In fact, there's a leap of faith that goes with all project management, isn't there? Because every project's unique, every project's different. And what we found over time, and this is true in every industry, is that people that diligently use all the project management tools, and that risk management is a great example, is that they have fewer problems. And so if you looked at, if an executive is in doubt of this, they should look at a track record of project managers who are diligent about risk management versus those who aren't. And over time, they'll see that the project managers who are diligent about risk management just have fewer problems during the project. They have fewer crises. And as a result, things just tend to go smoother. So it's not easy to manage or to measure the value of the problem that doesn't happen, but you can see over time that one project manager is going to have a much better track record than the other.
Yes, and it's a good thing to be prepared for this project ahead of time, or risks or issues ahead of time. Then, okay, you dealt an issue, and now, okay, what's your plan? Well, if you have a management plan, you would have one. I like how you describe the high-performance team framework. Can you describe how positive team environment, leadership, and collaborative problem-solving impact the team?
All projects are about solving problems. Remember, this goes back to this concept that a project is a change. It's a journey of discovery, right? So, and so every project team solves problems together. And this is true of all projects, but it's particularly true of technical projects or, for example, projects that change organization policy. So if you've got a group of people that are going to make decisions together multiple times a week, well, that's really the definition of what does a team do. And particularly a high-performance team, and the chapter on high-performance team addresses 9 specific areas that a project manager can focus on in terms of building that capability. Now, some of those areas are about building a positive culture. A culture, for example, where active listening is a part of the routine of how we do our work. A culture, for example, where effective meeting management is just a part of how we do our work. Because if you know that if you've attended meetings on a regular basis and they're not managed well, that's frustrating. You're not a high-performance team, right? So these are all building blocks. So that when a team has all these building blocks in place to make them effective at solving problems together, they make better decisions, they get better momentum. Frankly, they enjoy their jobs. You know, one of the challenges associated with teams that have to make decisions together over and over is that we're just not all the same. I know for myself that I tend to be kind of a big picture person who's maybe in a little bit too much of a hurry. And that's why I really appreciate when I've got a person on my team who's very detail oriented and would rather take another look at the facts before we make a decision. Right now, there's naturally going to be a little tension between us. But the fact is, if as a project leader, we've put all these building blocks in place that help the team effectively make decisions together, that the 2 different styles that we have will both be appreciated, and that we'll both make a good contribution, and that we'll both be able to enjoy the job that we have and enjoy the team that we have. So I think one of the things, my favorite things about this chapter on high-performance teams is that, you know, yes, it's important. If you're going to have an effective team, you've got to be able to make decisions together. But more than that, if your team members are going to like their job, it's because you've established all of these capabilities, and people can be, it's the difference between being dysfunctional and functional. And wouldn't you all rather be on a functional team?
Correct, yeah. And that's, there was like one section in your book on Habitat for Humanity, and I volunteered to have a building fix for our homeless vets. It's a worthy cause, and I believe that each of us who is fortunate enough needs to help out those that are in need. And let's get into the controlling. Controlling scope to deliver value is important. Can you explain the danger of incremental costs versus schedule changes?
Right. So in project management, we speak of the triple constraint, which means that we delivered the desired scope on time and on budget. So these 3 items are tightly related. What you want, and the question is, what do you want, how much you're willing to spend to get it, and when do you want it? So the business case and the project plan should address these questions, right? But once the work starts, if the cost of the work starts to slowly go up, a little here, a little there, eventually the overall cost will be out of balance. We'll be paying more for the project than intended, and that might ruin the business case. And the same is true for a schedule. If you got a delay here, a delay there, and suddenly we're so far behind schedule that we can't meet the deadline. Cost and schedule problems are a part of every project. They happen for all of us. So what's critical then is that we are constantly measuring progress as we compare to the plan, and we see these problems early when they're small. We see that we're starting to fall behind schedule or that we're starting to be over budget, and then we can quickly figure out what's the root cause of this and address it. Because again, if we don't address the small pieces, slowly they grow big, and then we fall way too far behind, or we go way too much over budget.
No, totally, yeah, I agree. Now, can you explain the value of change threshold and change change board?
Right. So we're just talking about changes, right, and incremental change. So changes are going to happen. Sometimes a customer will make a requirements change request, and it won't cost us anything. You know, but when I'm building my house here, I might have said, "Oh, I just realized I think I'd like a different color of paint." Well, you know what? If we haven't ordered the paint yet, it probably doesn't matter, right? So it's a low cost to change, as long as, and this is where the change board comes in, as long as all the people who are involved with that specification or that paint are aware of it, then we make the request, we say we're going to change the color of the paint, and everybody who needs to know knows about it, and that's fine, right? So a change board basically is the governing body of engaged stakeholders who need to manage changes, so that we understand when somebody says, yeah, I think I want to change the paint color, one of the people might say, we've already ordered that paint. It's been delivered. Oh, so there's going to be a cost to that. Yeah. Or they might say, we look around and we say all the involved parties, and they say, nope, there's not really going to be any cost to that. You made your change early enough where it won't cost anything. Okay, good. Now let's say that I've got a really big change on my project. It's not just a zero cost change or even a small cost change. It's a very expensive change. I don't want just the project manager to consider that or just the customer, but we might have to work it up the organizational ladder.
That's right.
Now, for example, I had a customer on a pipeline project, and they were building a natural gas pipeline, about 100 miles of it, and every day the project manager and their counterpart would meet at the end of the day and talk about the little changes that occurred. But at the end of the week, they met with their managers and their executive team. They talked about the overall changes and what happened. And so the idea of change boards is, one, that we have all of the points of view represented on the impact of a change so we can correctly understand the impact of a change. And the second part of change thresholds is that some changes are small. We should let the project team, the project manager, make that decision. Other changes are big, and therefore we need to allow a higher level of authority to get involved and to make that decision.
Oh, that's a great explanation, Eric. Like leading change control boards, I can tell you, yes. You don't want to have like a nitty-gritty each change goal, but at certain point, if it affects a portfolio or a program level interdependencies, then you bring up to the change control meeting, you explain it, then all of the heads and executives can make it their decision right there at that time. Now, you have a section called like data is an information. Can you explain why trends are more useful than snapshots and why schedule variance doesn't tell the whole story?
Right. You know, on a regular basis, I hope that we're tracking our progress, right? We can see what our plan is. We can see if we're, let's say, staying on schedule or not. And the thing about a schedule is snapshot. If we take that, let's say, weekly, and we see that we're a month behind, well, that's alarming, unless we were 2 months behind the last time we checked it, because then it shows a positive trend, right? So we definitely want to see data. We want to see where should we be today, where are we actually today, but we also want to see how are we doing over time. Because if we're finding that a project that was originally stumbling and out of the gate and falling behind is now starting to catch up, then we don't punish the team for being behind schedule. We reward the team for catching up. And so snapshots are necessary to establish trends, but trends really are the real story that we're looking for. Now, the second part of the question is why schedule variance doesn't tell the whole story. And there are so many factors that can affect schedule. And so we have to look at multiple factors. And, of course, critical path is a major one. We can see that critical path means all the tasks that have to happen in sequence and that have to happen on time in order for us to finish on time, right? And when we have we have a big project, we have many tasks going on, at the same time, we may find that some of our tasks are ahead of schedule and some of them are behind schedule. And overall, that starts to create confusion, doesn't it? Because you say, well, if I'm ahead of schedule on 3 tasks, I'm behind on 2 tasks, am I really ahead of schedule? You know what? That's why we need to really be able to understand the size of each task. And that's why we use techniques like earned value, or even in Agile, like burn up and burn down charts. These are techniques that allow us to sort of synthesize what's really happening. And the other factor, though, is I could be on a project where I had 10 tasks that were ahead of schedule and only 2 that were behind schedule. But if those 2 are on the critical path, I'm probably not really ahead of schedule, right? So I need to be able to understand all those various factors to be able to understand my schedule.
Right. Now, I like your line, the art of project management is applying the science to achieving your goals. So I have like multi-part question. What is the justification for the CEOs, presidents of companies and organizations having EPMO? And is it just another course, or why have project portfolio management?
Right. The simple answer is like going back to my brother's question. You know, my brother gets his car maintained on a regular basis. Isn't that just another cost? Or is there a long-term benefit to that? And I think that when it comes to an enterprise project management office, an EPMO, we're really talking about the overall efficiency of the organization. Now, there's really 2 very clear benefits, and you've identified it here. Let's start with the project portfolio benefit. Project portfolio management benefit means we're going to select the right projects. And given that we have limited resources, I have not seen an organization yet that had unlimited resources. Some have a lot of resources, but they still have to make choices. So we want to choose the projects that will best support our strategic goals and not select too many projects, right? Both of those are important. In fact, the most consistent mistake that I see is people selecting all the right projects, but there are too many of them, and they can't complete them all. So they spend all the money, and they don't complete all the projects. And if you spend money but you don't complete a project, that's waste. Probably the simplest way to understand it is every time you're on a crowded freeway, you have a whole bunch of cars going really slow because you have too many cars for the freeway. Well, if you have too many projects for the resources of the organization, they're all going to be slow, they're going to be inefficient, they're probably not complete, and that's just wasteful. So project portfolio management adds value by making sure that the right projects, the best projects, get completed quickly and chances are more efficiently and effectively, right? So that's the first half of that. Now, the second benefit of a PMO is basically just developing the strength of execution. The strength of project management means, just like we talked about earlier, if you're going to be, you want to be good at innovation, you'd better have good project management. Well, if you have a bunch of projects that are part of the cost of your, that you spend money on, why don't you be good at it? If you want to be a mountain climber, you've got to be fit. If you're going to run projects, you need good project management. And having a PMO is what helps you build your project management strengths. So those are really the 2 things that make your project investments pay off.
For organizations who are leaders in their field, and even for CIO and president who hired me to build EPMOs from scratch, they see the value of having the enterprise project management offices. And like in your book, you mentioned that even volunteer foundations like Bill and Melinda Gates foundations have EPMOs there. All of the organizations can benefit.
Right. That's right. And I think here's the one irony that I see, and that is that when people are feeling the pain of a lack of good project selection, right? They don't have project portfolio management, so they feel the pain of too many projects. Or they don't have good project management practices, and they feel the pain of projects that are falling behind or they're just kind of stumbling, right? So they put an EPMO in place, and things start to work really well. And at the point where things are going really smoothly, a new executive team comes in, and they say, all our projects are going so well, I don't see why we need a PMO. Everything's going so well. And that's just like the story about risk management and why my brother is going to have fewer breakdowns over time, because he's got a good habit. So the irony is that when we have really good habits, everything's going so well, sometimes the value it sort of disappears beneath the surface, but it's still valuable. So that's where you need to have informed, intelligent people who understand the value of it and who are willing to stay committed and invested in it. And I think this is one of the biggest trends I've seen in project management over the last 30 years, worked in the industry, is that there is an increasing commitment and investment in belief in the value of enterprise project management and PMOs, because over time, enough people have seen that they pay off. Initially what I saw was that if you focus on do we manage our project well, that was a good first start. But as soon as we started managing our projects well, we realized that we had too many projects, and so both of those things go hand in hand. But the good news is more and more organizations are committed to that. And the example in the book with the Bill and Melinda Gates organization, they had such a classic, well-developed, well-designed EPMO that I was thrilled that they would allow us to profile that in the book.
Now organization and a company has a EPMO, so why develop project management standards as opposed to just buy them?
Good question, yeah. Why does every organization need to develop their own project management standards, right? For example, the Project Management Institute has the project management body of knowledge and has a set of standards for managing projects. Why don't we all just grab that and say, this is how we do it? But again, I'm going to go back to the differences that exist in projects. You could be developing a video game. You could be building a freeway. You could be trying to develop a new vaccine. You could want to deploy a medical records process. Well, those are very different kinds of projects. And so the level of cost management, the level of risk management, the method for schedule management is going to change for each one of those. So while there are a defined number of techniques for project management, at the end of the day, people have certain similarities in their projects, and they can benefit when they think about what projects they have, what are the similarities among their projects, and how a charter could be designed that fits every project that particular organization runs, or status reports fit that are just right for their kind of project, right? Maybe they're running short projects that have just a few people. They want a very simple status report. Or maybe you're like one of my clients who's running billion-dollar infrastructure, transportation infrastructure projects. Well, they want a completely different status report, don't they? And that's why, at the end of the day, it really makes sense for an organization to design its own standard based on industry standard practices.
Correct. Yep. When I build EPMOs from scratch, I say, okay, yes, PMI has this standard templates. Agile have their own. Well, what I learned is, here's my, in this business also for almost like 30 years, saying, okay, here's what combination of the best practices and methodologies would be helpful in this organization. So definitely build on top of best practices and make it your own. Yes, for projects, there are certain needs for requirements, and if you can explain the importance of a business analyst, like, doesn't the customer specify what they need, so why need a BA, business analyst?
Right. Doesn't the customer already know what they need? Why do I need a business analyst to write down what a customer wants And why doesn't the customer just go to my development team, right? Now, again, business analysts tend to be mostly used in information technology and software projects. But what we find out is that understanding and clarifying requirements and prioritizing requirements takes skill. And that's really the skill that the business analysts have. Being able to creatively solve problems, to be able to sort out the facts, be able to prioritize, that's really a skill set. And in many ways, it's the same skill set that an architect has on a construction project, right? They want to be able to help a customer understand what's possible and to prioritize what's possible. So business analysts, architects, these people who engage with the end user, they have the skill for listening and then to probe more deeply and to help somebody crystallize what's really important to them. Because frankly, a lot of times the customer's desire can be somewhat subjective and hard for them to define. Like, I'll know it when I see it, but I'll know it when I see it is kind of an expensive way to develop a project, right? So the BA can ask clarifying questions until the customer can really understand what the impacts of what they want are. And then, of course, you clarify the requirement and prioritize. That's the other big piece of that. And the good business analyst helps the customer do both. And that's really helps the customer then to really think through what's the real business value they want and how do I get that most efficiently? How do I spend the least amount of money to get the biggest bang for my project? And that's a huge value.
I like how you end the chapter, each of the chapters with, when you have like a PMP type of questions and answer sections. And I like the diagrams of customer sponsors, steering committee, portfolio experts to operational and technology, as well as the real world examples from the real companies. This is definitely an MBA course, not just for project managers, but for all of us. So in conclusion, if you have like one message that everyone would be able to see around, what would that be?
You know, I think if there's one message, boy, you got a 500-page book with one message. That's a tough question. But you know, as comprehensive, let's say, as project management can be, I would also say that what's really important if you're a student of project management, and I consider myself a student of project management because I'm always trying to learn. I think what's important is that project management, at the end of the day, can be practical, right? And the practical issue is every project is supposed to deliver value, right? And every project takes a number of stakeholders. So the most important thing for project managers and students of project management is to remember that that diverse group of stakeholders needs a leader who can pose the key questions, who can focus us on the most important issue today, who can structure the information that we have so that we can come to agreements, that we can make estimates together. That's really why a project manager is a leader, because they help a diverse group of stakeholders who don't necessarily report to each other, right? There's no authority where somebody has to do something. So those stakeholders have to constantly come together to agree, and the project management tool set helps them to analyze, right, to the critical thinking and the communication. So it's a leadership job. Project management is a leadership job. And I'd also want to add that, again, it doesn't have to be complicated. Certainly the larger the project, the more expert you need to be. Your own career is evidence of that, right? But I've just had so many people tell me that they appreciate that you can explain a complicated thing like project management in a way that's practical and accessible.
That's true. Now, when you hear the word success, who or what comes to mind?
So again, I mentioned that I think earlier that I live in Seattle. And so in Seattle, there's some pretty remarkable brands that are headquartered here. You know, for example, in 1990, when I was just getting myself established here in Seattle, if I wanted to go out for a good cup of coffee, there's a lot of nice little coffee shops, and there's one little shop called Starbucks in one of our popular tourist areas at Pike Place Market. Well, of course, 30 years later, they're a global brand, right? Or we have Microsoft or Costco and many others. And I think that one of the things that success means to me is that somehow they have figured out what people want in a sustainable way. So, because success is a balance, right? Success, you can't just have a good product. You have to have a product that is good and affordable, and that meets regulations, and that people like over time. So anything that is really successful is balanced. Now, those are pretty gigantic examples of what comes to mind. But I also think of just a week ago, I was able to attend remotely the kickoff or the opening of a new affordable housing apartment that just opened. And this was operated by a local charity, Catholic Catholic Housing Authority. And as folks who were getting on the camera and talking about this, they had so many community stakeholders involved. The mayor of Kent, where this thing was being opened, a local county housing authority representative. They had many different funders involved. And so again, when I think of this project's success, certainly it's going to support a really important audience. These are people who need affordable housing, and you mentioned vets. They're going to have housing for vets there. So it had a great mission, but it had so many stakeholders, and they were able to engage with all of those stakeholders to balance what was important to all of them to bring it together. And so I think success is really about balance.
Yep, great. Two more questions. Where should people go and learn more about you, or if someone wants to get in touch with you?
Well, thank you for that question. Our website is versatilecompany.com. So you can visit www.versatilecompany.com or just email projects@versatilecompany.com, and your questions will eventually make their way to me.
Great. Is there anything else you wanted to add that we didn't cover, or any parting words?
You know, I think that project management will continue to be a challenge because we live in a world of change. And so the great opportunity for anybody who wants to be involved in meaningful change is to embrace the project management skill set, the project management toolbox, and always view yourself, if you're a project manager, view yourself as a leader first, and see the people that are involved in the project, and allow the tool set of project management to be a critical thinking tool set, a communication tool set focused on how you can bring a group of people together in order to deliver important value to whatever organization you're working for.
Great. So again, thank you, Eric, for being my guest. Now project managers will have an MBA after reading your book, and hopefully you'll join me again at WITS, What It Takes to Succeed. And to the audience, please subscribe to WITS Show, like, share, and link, comment what you like and what you would want to learn more about, and that way I can continue to bring leaders like Eric and experts who will provide the insight to help you succeed. And best of all, buy Eric's book, the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management, for yourself and for your team and others who might benefit. And again, thank you. Have WITS to succeed, and until the next time.